Another week in the depths of summer. Let's take a look at those maximums for yesterday. We had 110 degrees up around Tulsa. Lots of heat through Texas, Missouri, Louisiana, and also in the northwestern states. Let's take a look up in that region. 111 in the Columbia River Basin, 102 all the way up into British Columbia. On the other hand, the eastern U.S. looking fairly mild, 70s and 80s in that part of the continent. And as we go up further to the north, that's what the highs look like. 80 degrees up in the Arctic Ocean right there. However, cold air sweeping from west to east. Let's take a look at the surface map. That's a look at what we're dealing with today, another incursion of cold air coming out of the north-central U.S., but lots of tropical air covering the country, dew points in the 60s and 70s all the way from Texas up into the northeastern states. Lots of monsoon rain across the southwestern U.S. into the Four Corners area, extending as far north as Interstate 70. Not very much of it into Denver and the northern Rockies, but as you go south through Trinidad into Alamosa, southwestern Utah, and around Desert Rock to Pahrump, Nevada, lots of showers and storms. And I saw on the satellite picture there were tons of cells throughout much of Mexico, so that monsoon is really lighting up across that part of the continent. And I was thinking maybe that's the first sign of the increase in the Madden-Julian oscillation. We were looking at that moving west to east and possibly picking up the activity right around this time of July. Anyway, let's take that north into the northwestern U.S. Once again, it's another hot day, coming up to 99 there in the deserts of Washington. Then up in Alaska, we see that cold front. That started out a couple of days ago out in the Bering Sea, out in this area here. Some very temperamental weather, and now the cold air is sweeping from Siberia and the Chukchi Sea into Yukon and Northwest Territories. Still left with a warm sector in Nunavut, 79 there at Baker Lake, but plenty of cold air up to the North Baffin Island, and the high Arctic still looking at their seasonal 30s and 40s. Pretty quiet out there in Newfoundland and Quebec, but another frontal system coming out of Ontario, heading up that way, so the weather will probably be going downhill in eastern Canada over the next day or two. Still nothing to report in the tropics. The 5-day outlook, nothing there either. About the only forecast desk getting action is at SPC. Slight risk for upslope storms in northeastern Colorado and southwestern Nebraska. No watches in effect, but we're looking for a possibility of that in that upslope air and also out in the Ozarks. Some energetic storms there in Arkansas. You can see them popping up there around Little Rock and Conway. Looks like along a boundary right in this area, and a similar boundary from south of Memphis up towards the Nashville area. Still early in the convective day in Colorado. Some storms going up on the Palmer Divide and the Front Range, not quite out to that deeper moisture. That's located right here in that stratocumulus and cumulus field. Maybe in a few hours we'll see some storms making their way out to the better LCLs. There's a quick look at the environment in that area. If we plot the isodrosotherms, the 60 isodrosotherm would run something like that. 65, that's going to be coming about up through Goodland into about north of Burlington, maybe around Imperial, and then back out towards Concordia. So that right there is the moisture axis. So any storms going up along the Palmer Divide and the Front Range, eventually they'll probably move out and interact with that moisture field. And I do think we have some boundaries in the northeastern U.S., the Appalachians. Lots of low 80s in Pennsylvania, 70s in West Virginia, and in Ohio. So I think probably right in here boundaries. And that's probably helping to generate some of those storms in North Carolina, Virginia. Let's take a look at that satellite. Well, certainly a lot of cells from North Carolina up into Virginia and across the eastern Appalachians. Looks like the stuff further out west is more elevated. Probably that's all a debris field. There's some typical activity for July in Florida. I think this is less than what we typically see, and certainly the sea breeze working its way north. And looks like we have an active sea breeze as well in southeast Texas and Louisiana. Cells all the way from Columbus, Texas, up through Lufkin and back towards Baton Rouge and Alexandria. Checking in on the southwest monsoon, definitely busy. Not as much activity in the lower deserts. Yuma, Phoenix, looking pretty dry. Tucson may be getting a little bit of that activity. I don't know, they're kind of on the edge. But the Mogollon Rim, the higher elevations, Flagstaff, Albuquerque, Truth or Consequences, they're all getting that activity. And even up in Las Vegas. Well, the valley looks dry, but as you go out towards Mount Charleston, Desert Rock, Indian Springs, Beatty, yeah, they're getting numerous cells. Death Valley, I think that's right here, bone dry, as we would expect. And up in the Pacific Northwest, it is a scorcher, up to 100 degrees in some areas. The vegetation does look a little bit green, so maybe not a whole lot of drought activity, but certainly it's warm, uncomfortable, and I'm sure they don't need this hot weather. Well, we could talk all day about what's going on today, but the weather is fairly localized, not really much in the way of large organized systems. So we'll go ahead and go right to the forecast. Let's look at the temperature records. For today, a hot one, 107 at Yakima, that'll break the record, set about 25 years ago. And just one lone record being tied at DeQueen, Arkansas. For tomorrow, again, the focus is on the northwestern U.S. Medford will come in close to 110 degrees. Yakima also near 110. Reno, 102, tying the record set about 6 years ago. For Friday, going into the weekend, yep, more of the same in the Pacific Northwest. It's going to be confined to the deserts, though. I don't see any numbers out around Seattle or Portland. And a little bit of heat showing up on the East Coast. A repeat for Saturday, 106 at Yakima. That's definitely not a good place to live if you hate the heat. For Sunday, some moderation to that heat wave. A lone 99-degree reading at Burns, Oregon. On Monday, looks like a return to seasonal normals. That's going to be the first day of August. And so far, looking pretty good for Tuesday as well. For the master solution to what the weather's doing, let's take a look at the 250 millibar chart near the top of the troposphere. The jet pattern affecting mostly Alaska, coming down into the Dakotas and across the Great Lakes. Well-defined vortex near Winnipeg. In the southern U.S., we're under the influence of a subtropical ridge extending east-west from the Four Corners area to the Carolinas. South of that, weak easterly flow, helping to sustain the tropical convection along the Gulf Coast. And let's take a look at the forecast over the next week or two. Bring that forward. A progressive pattern to the polar front jet. Things are moving from west to east. That vortex, upper level low, departing eastern Canada and bringing the strong jet eastward with it. In its wake, we're going to be seeing that upper level high building into parts of the southern U.S. That shows up, yeah, right there you see a contour picking up across the desert southwest, and that's going to probably build eastward. It's going to take a little while for that to happen, but eventually we do see it appear around, that's going to be the 5th of August, so we're getting into late next week. That's going to be upper level high, indicating hot weather across the northeastern U.S. New England may be looking a little bit mild since they're going to have that northwesterly flow, but as you go south, you will get into some of that very uncomfortable air. Some troughing in the west coast. That southerly flow will probably help lift some of that monsoon moisture into the southwestern region. And at the very end of the sequence, that's going to be it right there, August 6th. Little vortex right there, that could be some tropical activity. Let's take a look at the sea level pressure chart. And this time of year, we really want to focus in on the Caribbean, the Gulf, the Atlantic, because a lot of our tropical activity comes from that region, and we are getting into August, so that is quite important. What we see here is a very strong Bermuda high, well-defined trade winds. There's little indications of easterly waves embedded in the flow, but that's probably about the only thing we have to be concerned about. What we look for is tropical depressions, closed circulations, very strong waves, and really just not seeing much of that. So kind of a slow start to tropical weather season. I mean, we could get some stuff going down in that area, but nothing appears to be affecting the U.S., at least until maybe the second week of August. But that's just a guess. That's pretty far out. And we could very well go for a couple weeks here with no hurricanes or tropical storms. Anyway, we'll have to see. For the short term, though, it does look fairly quiet. And that brings us down to the synoptic and subsynoptic scale. The Gulf is open in Texas. Some evidence of boundaries. You can see these inverted troughs. Those are all going to be boundaries, probably old outflow, stagnant fronts, stuff like that. Maybe, let's see, another one. Yeah, maybe one right in there. That's probably that one we were dealing with today. And high pressure, that's driving in the cool air into the Minnesota, Dakotas region. And definite evidence of a cold core system. That's it right there. That's going to be a barotropic cold core low. And that stacks from the upper levels down to the surface. And with those low heights aloft, cool temperatures, the air there tends to be unstable. There's not a whole lot of low-level moisture, so what you tend to get is an inverted V sounding with lots of elevated convection. Then going into the remainder of the week, you can see a little bit of a frontal boundary pushing into Texas and Oklahoma, helping to produce some of that thunderstorm activity all the way back into the Midwest. Stagnant frontal boundary regime continues, and numerous cells from New Mexico joining up with the monsoon activity and all the way back into Tennessee and the Appalachians. So rain chances going up for the south central U.S. into the weekend. You can still see that remnants of the outflow boundaries, the old fronts, stuff like that all through here, helping to produce this daily activity through the weekend into Monday. And then it starts settling down a little bit. Deep Gulf moisture makes its way north. Another frontal boundary showing up in the data. That's going to be it right there. Probably linked up into that Ontario system. So some cool air coming down, but merging up with the moisture coming up from the Gulf. Tuesday and Wednesday, more of the same. Looks a little bit drier going into Wednesday. You can see the southwest monsoon is definitely going full force. And as we get into August, a lot of the activity makes it into the central Rockies, the Great Basin, and the northern Rockies as well. So this is about what we would expect this time of year. No evidence of tropical activity, no tropical depressions, no hurricanes, no typhoons. Yeah, that would be bad news. And as we get into the end of the sequence, the 6th and the 7th, not much change. Looks like another front working its way south. Tropical activity picking up in Texas, but mostly just disorganized precip. And that brings us to the end of the sequence. So kind of a stagnant weather pattern. We'll try to find stuff to look at over the next week or two, but this is pretty typical for late summer. And that's all for this edition of Forecast Lab. I will leave you with some footage out around the San Antonio area. Thanks once again to Greg for this great footage. Hope you have a great Wednesday and Thursday. We'll see you back here on Friday for another edition of Forecast Lab. Take care. Bye-bye.